Man, that was excitement for us kids. And stop me, Marty, if I'm going too long, but let me share another one. Again, he had us, responsibilities. I mean, we all had jobs when we were little kids and all kinds of things, but I first started selling cars when I was 15. I didn't have a driver's license. I had to ride a bicycle to work, get my necktie on, and the customers had to do all the car driving because I didn't have a driver's license. I'm selling cars. Summer job. Anyway, I sold this one car, and the guy went off. It was a used car. And a few hours later, he comes back, and there's something wrong with his car, and he is just mad, and he's just, and he's yelling and screaming at me and everything, and I'm just going, whoa, whoa. And Dad's office looked down over the used car lot, and he saw it. He was on the second floor. He could see what was happening. Boy, he came down, and the door pushed open, and I can't repeat what he said because I'm in a church, but it was bad. And this guy thought that we had a grizzly bear and had unleashed it because his face drained. He went pale white, and he started backing up in fear, and he just about ran to his car and was gone. And Mark got saved. And that illustrates another principle of Joe Putnam, how he protected his family. And so much of what he did was for his family. And that, I don't know, to me, one of the greatest things ever is the way he protected his family. Maybe I'll tell one more. If I got time, Marty, I can get one more. No? Make it quick? I got one more quick one. I'll move to adulthood now. That was 15 years old. Adulthood. Once again, hey, you're fully grown now. This is after I got out of college. He heard about a car dealership for sale in Oklahoma City. I had never had any management job. I was just starting at a Chevrolet dealership where I was going to be an assistant manager, and I had no supervision over people. It was mainly doing paperwork, and I'd only been there about a month or so. Anyway, Dad calls me. I'm buying a car dealership in Oklahoma City, and you're going to be the car dealer. I got the plane tickets for you. You leave tomorrow. It's like, whoa, holy mackerel. And I'd sold cars, and I'd done jobs, but I'd never supervised people. Only been frontline type of situation. And all alone, of course, I get on the airplane, I fly out to Oklahoma City, and I'm a car dealer. This was in the rough part of town. We were having cars stolen all the time. One of the first months I'm there, some guy pulls a knife and is chasing me around the showroom. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, "Call the police! Call the police!" It was, boy, talk about going into the deep end. And I would have gone broke, to be honest. Things were just coming down around me. And once again, Dad he took care of us. And he sent me a business manager that he had working for him, convinced the guy to leave wonderful California for Oklahoma City, where the tornadoes are everywhere. And the guy came out, and we managed to put together a good business. So he was a great man. And, I don't know, whatever us kids are who we are, and good, bad, or indifferent, but we've all done well in life. And a whole big part of that, I think, was get out there, stand on your own 2 feet, and if you are going to fall off the cliff, I'll grab you. Don't worry, I will save you from going over the cliff. So, God bless you, Joe. I know you're with us right now. And thank you all. One last thought. I have to express just sincere gratitude to Julie. And Dad talked to me many times about how much he loved Julie, and he felt blessed that he really had two great wives in his life. So my heart goes out to you, Julie, and many blessings to you. Dad loved you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
I want to say one quick thing to my son, Joe. Now do you understand when we tow you behind the boat, behind Lake Tahoe? Those high-speed runs? Now you understand. I was 1 year old when my dad tied me to a sled and dragged me on the mean streets of North Dakota. Now you understand. My brother David wanted to say a few words.
Joe Putnam loved horses. He loved them more than anybody you have ever met. Joe wasn't just a skilled horseman and a professional level rodeo cowboy. He was the most skilled equestrian any of us have ever known or ever will know. When Joe was a little boy growing up on the dusty plains of South Dakota, everyone in his family thought horses were primarily draft animals. His uncle bred the finest Belgian draft horses, and these powerful giants had a great reputation back in Gregory, South Dakota, for strength and hard work. When you farm with horses, you depend on them to plow the fields, bring in the crops, and you better have strong horses or you might starve to death. And the Dakota Putnams certainly had fantastic draft horses. As a boy, Joe was a rebel when it came to draft horses. He understood how important draft horses were to hard scrabble farming in that time and place. But young Joe spent plenty of time working with draft horses, and he felt a calling to do a lot more with horses and putting them in traces and pulling heavy loads. He thought the horses could do a lot more than that. And when he was a little boy, he had a horse named Mousie, the only horse on Grandpa Putnam's farm that never pulled a plow. Joe would work cattle with Mousie, and he trained him to be a polished saddle horse. To taunt Joe, his brothers would sometimes put a harness on Mousie. It was a dangerous thing to do because Joe would get fighting mad if a harness got anywhere within an inch of his beloved Mousie. But life was boring on the farm, and getting Joe fighting mad was exciting. And that's what they did back on the old homestead. The Dust Bowl hit that part of South Dakota hard. Half the farmers were reduced to like the grapes of wrath, where they had to pull up stakes and leave. And before the farmers and ranchers pulled up stakes, they'd turn all their horses loose into the wild prairie, where they instantly went feral. To the Putnams, wild horses were a money-making scheme. Grandpa Putnam and his sons got on their horses, rounded up the wild horses, corralled them, and then the boys would break the horses, turn them into saddle horses, and train them. And when I say break, that's like a bucking bronco, like in a rodeo. You got broke as much as a horse got broke. And then when they finally had those horses trained, Grandpa Putnam would sell them for $20 a piece, which was actually more than you think in the Great Depression. And this is where Joe really learned how to ride. And none of us can imagine how dangerous it was breaking wild prairie broncos back then. When I was 5 years old, we lived in the suburbs of Devils Lake, North Dakota. There are tons of farms and ranches only a mile or so outside of town, and Joe and Mary Lou were constantly driving out to the local ranches, looking at horses, and trying to figure out how they could buy one and keep it with the rancher. But the car business was different back then, and Joe worked routinely 12-hour days, 7 days a week. And not only did Mary Lou have 6 kids to take care of, but these kids were little hellions. They're wild creatures, always getting in trouble. They're terrorizing the neighbors. Neither Joe nor Mary Lou had the extra bandwidth required to take care of feeding horses. and taking care of horses back in North Dakota. And it was even worse when we moved to California. In the suburbs of San Mateo were a strict horse-free zone. And Joe was still working those 12-hour days. And Mary Lou's pack of hellions had by then grown devil's horns. They were bad. They were bad and unruly children. Again, no bandwidth for horses, but then something wonderful happened in the early 1970s. The town of Woodside called out to Joe, "I am a horse-friendly town, Joe." This is the town of Woodside talking. "Houses here come on 3-acre plots, and right next to me is Stanford, with plenty of land that you can lease and raise cattle. Joe, put your little hellions on horseback. Teach them to raise cattle, sheep, and chickens. Teach them to ride like the wind. It will tame them and make them manageable. Leave San Mateo, Joe. Become a rancher. Stop working 12-hour days. Follow your destiny, Joe. Move to Woodside." And Joe and Mary Lou wisely listened to the siren song. They moved to Woodside. Joe leased the Stanford cattle land. He bought a ranch in Plymouth. He started raising cattle. Soon the pack of hellions were staring wide-eyed into a stable where a thoroughbred Appaloosa cross named Easy Lark and an Arab Mustang cross named Sparkplug stood calmly chomping. Soon Kathleen was raising prize steers like Whopper, who, by the way, won the Reserve Grand National Champion at the Cow Palace. Shout out to Kathleen. And Joe became a cowboy again. Not just any cowboy, but a nationally famous competition rodeo cowboy. Joe made more money with cars than he did with horses and cattle, but he had more fun with horses and cattle. And so that's the takeaway. At least that's what I'm taking away from Joe's life, is do what you love and have fun.
Just one correction. I was not a hellion. I never got in trouble. I never gave my parents one moment of grief because I was in church all the time. And Terry Anderlini can attest to that. Terry never got me out of trouble. Maybe once or twice. A long, dear family friend, more than just our family attorney, but one of Joe's best friends and early friends. And Terry Anderlini would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Marty. Yeah, Joe never said anything bad about you kids, to me. But no, he loved his kids, and they respected him. And so it was a great relationship, Dad, Mom, and the kids. Great family. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my relationship with Joe Putnam. In 1970, I came to San Mateo County as a brand new lawyer, hired by Monaco and Reeve, a law firm in San Mateo. And the first assignment I had was to represent Joe Putnam in a very small debt collection case. And he was a big client of this firm. And so they thought, well, let's see what the kid can do. And I was scared to death to be representing Joe Putnam, one of the most important clients of this law firm. And so I said, well, I'll give it the best I can. So we set up an appointment. And Joe shows up 10 minutes early. And I think, well, he's probably here to scold me already. I haven't done a darn thing yet. But he came 10 minutes early. I found out later that one of his habits was to show up for appointments early. In fact, he had his watch set 5 minutes ahead of time. That was his favorite thing. And so when I met Joe, he expected me to be on time, which I was, and he expected me to be prepared, and I was. So I looked at the file, we sat down, we talked about this case. It was a small collection case, and the fellow that owed him the money, he knew he had the money. He would have forgiven him if he thought he was in hard times, but he knew he had the money. So that sort of made Joe kind of angry that he wasn't paying his bill. And so he said, go after him, kid. And off I went to court. And sure enough, I won that case, and I was very proud of that. And Joe patted me on the back, you see, and said, well, keep it up, kid. You're going to be a lawyer, a good lawyer someday. So that was 55 years ago, and I had many experiences with Joe in the courtroom and out of the courtroom. I remember one of the other cases we had, or events we had, was he was always negotiating car deals, and there was an opportunity to buy a car dealership locally here from a famous other car dealer, which he had gone nose to nose with on many occasions. I won't mention names. So the lawyers are negotiating a price, and everything's getting contentious. We end up in a business meeting, and the meeting goes on for, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours, and we come to a basic understanding of what the price of this dealership's going to be that Joe's going to buy. And what's hanging us up is $200,000 worth of garage equipment, a diagnostic machine, a couple of lifts, and this and that. And so me and the other lawyers started to argue about this, and we didn't want the deal to blow up. And both clients, including Joe, are getting a little annoyed at the delay. So he says to me, sit down, Terry. I'm going to take this man out in the hall. We're going to settle this in 5 minutes. I think, what, is there going to be a fight out in the hall? What's going to happen here? So I said, well, okay. And they go out, and I hear a bunch of yelling and this and that. And then I hear a bunch of laughing and this and that. And they come back in, and they say, it's all settled. I said, it is? How'd you get it settled? He said, well, we sell it the good old-fashioned way. We took out coins. We flipped for the diagnostic equipment. I named my price. I won the first flip. He won the second flip. I won the third flip. And it's all over. All the prices have been agreed upon, and we're walking out of here. And then he says to me, Terry, I really got him. He would have given him the equipment. He wasn't going to let the damn thing blow up. In fact, he walked away with another $200,000. He said, that was pretty slick, Joe. I got to remember that one. So another thing that happened was there was a contract that some manager in the dealership signed for mechanic rental uniforms. So I understand the business is that the mechanics get fresh uniforms every week, and there's a service that brings in the fresh ones and takes away the dirty ones, and they wash the dirty ones, and they replace supposedly the worn-out ones. And this contract that was signed by the dealership was for a whole year. And in the middle of this contract, he finds out that the service is no good, that the exchange was, the equipment they brought in was worn out, and people were arguing about this. And then he was even charging him for equipment or uniforms that weren't being delivered. So he complains about it, and the next thing I know, the manager of this uniform company tells the manager and tells Joe, well, if you want to get out of this contract, that's great, but there's a liquidated damage clause, which means you have to pay for 6 months of service without getting any service if you want to get out of the contract. In other words, to break the contract, you have to pay 6 more months of fees. Well, Joe says, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that. This is not right. This is not honest. And I'm going to contest this. And so the written contract looked pretty tough, but he says, Terry, go in there and you fight this case. So I'm fighting the case. In fact, I filed a cross-complaint against them for fraud and so forth and so on. And now we're about to go to trial. And we're about maybe three days before trial, and the lawyer representing this uniform company comes over to me. He says, okay, let's just make a deal, a walk-away deal. Instead of the $50,000 we want, pay us a couple of $1,000, and we'll go away, and we'll end this case. Call up Joe. I said, this is what they're proposing. He says, don't give them a nickel. They were dishonest, and you fight them to the end. Don't offer them a nickel. So went back, sorry, we're not offering you a nickel. We tried the case. We won the case. In fact, they owed us attorney's fees. Oh, Joe was so happy. He really, really was so, and I was too. But the proof of this thing was Joe was a very honest businessman. He did what was right. He had the integrity and brilliance of a great businessman. And when he was right, he would fight. And when he was wrong, he would admit it, and that would be the end of it. But one of the things I admired about Joe was he stuck to his guns. And when he was right, nothing was going to take it away from him. It didn't matter what the legal fees were. In fact, he told me, I don't care what your legal fees are. I want you to win this case. And that's the way he felt about it. So I had the highest degree of respect for him. He was a most wonderful man I've known in my 55 years. And during that 55 years, I never lost a case for him because he backed me every time. And so I was so proud to represent him. I was privileged to know him, as many of you are privileged to know him. This was a very special man. And he raised me through this practice. I went from a baby lawyer to a real lawyer because he taught me to be on time, be prepared, be respectful, and be honest. And those are the things that he taught me, and thank God he did. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think I would have been standing here today as the lawyer I am for many more years and the influence I've had on the legal community if it had not been for Joe Putnam. He was my mentor. I respected him so much, I can't say enough. Great man, we've lost a great man, but his memory will live on, and it certainly will with me. Thank you.
Terry is humble. Terry was also, maybe you give Joe some credit, president of the California State Bar for, I don't know, many years, Terry. He rose to be one of the most prominent lawyers in all of California, and I think he probably gives Joe a little bit of credit for that.
I give him all the credit for that.
Gives Joe all the credit for that, and maybe Joe's sons a little bit of credit. Terry also, well, we won't talk about the case with Lexus. I will say he is a brilliant attorney, and he is sorely, sorely missed. I wish you were still practicing for some of our current situations. Megan. Granddaughter Megan.
So this morning, I listened to with my 3.5-year-old, a Yodo daily program. And this morning, they shared that today is World Never Give Up Day. It's Never Give Up Day today. It's a global we're observing today, dedicated to celebrating resilience and determination. It's a day to honor those who persevere in the face of challenges, whether big or small, and to inspire others to keep striving towards their goals. And this day was founded to recognize the universal human experience of resilience. And that sort of knocked the wind out of me, thinking that here we were today celebrating Grandpa Joe on World Never Give Up Day. It's almost like you can hear it in his voice, you know, World Never Give Up Day. So I just wanted to share that with everyone as we think about this larger-than-life man. I tried to think of some other stories throughout the week, and I tried to wrap my head around him, like what was it? Was he just such a good listener? How did he know? How did he know when he came into Burlingame to pretend that he was there for the dealership? How did he know to do these things? And I do think some of what others were saying about him, he was humble and grounded, and he was an excellent listener, and he had resilience, right? He was never going to give up. Whatever he set his goals on, whether it was to be honest and to prove a point in the law room, I mean, he captured that, which it's so hard, I guess, for some people, for all people, to remember to stay resilient. But I think that was the word that I've been thinking about him throughout this week, thinking about him as a 5-year-old with his first job, capturing minks and selling them to the Army. He is just someone who never gave up. So anyways, I just wanted to share that. It seemed appropriate.
I think that's it, unless there's any other family members. Walter Wellsbury. Walter, you want to say something? Kathleen, did you want to say something? Yeah, maybe come on up. Walter Wellsbury is also a longtime family friend, and I think he's going to tell the story of how our association with the San Francisco Giants and all of those commercials my dad had, especially with Mike Krukow. This was the guy who introduced the two. He probably wants to talk about that.
I'm Kathleen, Joe's favorite child. So I got married 7 years ago to my beautiful spouse, Christine, and it was a small wedding. There were 8 guests, and we had the ceremony in our backyard, and we were sitting around our dining room table having kind of lunch, and my dad was nodding off. There were 2 attorneys and a judge at the table, and it wasn't that interesting. And then all of a sudden he woke up and he said to my spouse, "Chris, are you Mormon?" And no, First he said, "Chris, can I ask you a personal question?" And the table went silent. And then he said, "Are you Mormon?" And Chris answered him, "She was raised Mormon, but no longer is." And it brought joy to me that my dad was more concerned that I wasn't marrying a good Catholic than that I was marrying a woman. Because he loved me and he loved Chris for loving me. That's it. I just have one story.
Hi, folks. Walt Wellsfree here. And 40-plus year relationship with the Putnams has been a real highlight of my life. And I wanted to, before I talk about a little bit about Krukow and the Giants, I want to mention that in the late summer of 1982, I was a sore-armed USC pitcher that wasn't going to go any further in baseball. And I had a cousin, my cousin Earl Wellsfree, said, "You know what? Starting out as a young guy, you're 22 years old, why don't you go sell cars here in the Bay Area? And there's a fantastic auto group here on the peninsula, the Putnam Group. You should reach out to them." So I did that. And I landed at a dealership that David Putnam was the young dealer. It was called Jim Raines Buick. It became Champion Buick. That was in the fall of '82. Well, through the next 3 years, I got to know everyone in the family. Of course, Marty and I are good buddies to this day. Kent, Mark, the beautiful daughters. And I remember the Ponderosa, your home, the big Dobermans. It was quite a scene. But we became really good friends. Now, I did end up going through the transfer portal, and I went to Mercedes-Benz in Redwood City, and I worked for Trixie Brugger's father, Kent's wife's father, Herbert Brugger. And at Mercedes, this is in '87, I met Mike Krukow, and I sold Mike Krukow a car. And by the way, he introduced me to Willie Mays, and I sold Willie Mays a car, which was really a thrill. But at that time, I realized Mike Krukow has got a great personality. This guy is well-spoken, he's personable, he's a handsome guy. He could be a pretty good spokesperson. And so I approached Marty with it. And Marty talked to Joe, and then Joe, Marty, and I had a lunch meeting with Rick Corso in Burlingame, and they struck a deal. And unbelievably, that relationship lasted over 30 years on KNBR radio. So that was kind of the genesis of it. And I wanted to share that with you, and also mention that, the discipline that I learned with the Putnam, the 10 steps of selling an automobile: warm up, or meet and greet, warm up, land in stock, future presentation, trial close, etc. I didn't stay in the business. I've been a financial advisor for over 35 years. But that discipline and the personal relationship you need to develop with your clients really started with the Putnam organization. So cheers to Joe. Great life, well lived. Mary Lou was a fantastic lady as well. I'll never forget when she showed up at the Mercedes dealership with my wedding gift in 1987. She hand-delivered it, which was so sweet of her. But in any event, I wanted to pay tribute to Joe. Great guy. And in fact, I texted Mike Krukow when I learned of Joe's passing on Monday last week. And I'm going to read what Mike said. It's very brief, but it's to the point, and I think it's really well said. He said, "Darn," well, actually, he didn't really say darn, but "darn, sorry to hear about that. Walter. I loved him. He was a true American hero and a great man. So those are the words of Mike Krukow about Joe. Thank you very much.
Was there anyone else who wanted to say anything? One more. Oh, yeah, we got the lawyer, we got the CPA. Another longtime friend of Joe's, confident, Bill Boyd.
I promise to be quick, but my name's Bill Beloit, and my words are words of thanks. I met Joe in 1988, 89 for the first time, and as Marty said, that turned into the honor of being Joe's CPA for over 35 years. The respect and trust that he gave me was so important to me. And had such a positive influence on my life, not only in my career as a CPA, but as a person. And I'll never forget him for that. And I really appreciate and thank him. I kind of feel, when Terry said it, I said, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. He turned me from a baby accountant into, what'd you say, adult accountant? Whatever it was. Started at a baby. But when one thinks back in their life about people that had an impact in who they are, what they are, their successes, they always come up with someone who was a big impact. And Joe Putnam was a big impact in my life. And I'll just never forget him for that. So the best way I can remember him and honor him is to say thank you. So thank you, Joe.
Anyone else? I think, oh, we have granddaughter.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for gathering here today. I'm a little bit nervous. It's so fun and special hearing all these stories about Joe Putnam and how he was a great businessman and so many other wonderful things, but I really just knew him as Grandpa. One of the favorite things we did together was ride horses. He had this horse called Blarney, which he used to cut cattle on. And then I started riding Blarney, I think I was like 9 or 10, and the first one to really give me lessons about horseback riding was Grandpa. And I remember this one day, I was only like 10 years old, and we were in the covered arena in Woodside, and Grandpa's like, okay, you're gonna lope today. And I was like, ooh, I wonder what that means. And so I was on Blarney, and he's like, okay, kick your spurs, keep going, Blarney's gonna go really fast. And I was like, okay. And I kept kicking, and I don't think as a 10-year-old I really had enough power. And if you've ever been on a horse and you keep going, and they're at a trot, but they're not at a lope, Casey will know what I'm talking about. It's pretty scary. It's very bouncy, hard to hold on. But I looked over at Grandpa, and Blarney kind of swerved toward Grandpa a little bit, and Grandpa, in true Joe Putnam fashion, hit Blarney on the butt, and Blarney took off, and it was a lope. And I just was like, oh my gosh, this, it's just smooth, and this is so cool. I had never loped before in my life, and I don't know what he said and how exactly he did it, but there was just this feeling of he believed in me, and he knew I could do it. And there's so many wonderful things I can take away from his life and his memory, but I think the biggest one is to always believe in yourself. I know he did. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Greg Monk's another longtime friend, lifetime in law enforcement. I'm not sure how that relates to the Putnam family, but Greg Monk's.
Don't worry. Marty, your secrets are safe with me. I first met Joe about 40 years ago when I started dating my wife, whose father was also in the Mounted Patrol. But When I first ran for sheriff, Joe and Mary Lou put on a wonderful fundraiser at their house and encouraged me, and were big supporters of mine. But more importantly, they were longtime supporters of the sheriff's office and law enforcement. And Joe in particular was very supportive of our youth programs. And his generosity really touched the lives of thousands of young kids here in San Mateo County. We used to have a summer program, and it was up in the Skyline area, but it would always culminate at the Mounted Patrol. And Joe would put on a cutting horse demonstration for the kids, and it was really had a big impact on them. But what Mary Lou did at St. Francis Center, what Joe did in supporting our youth programs, really had a long-lasting impact on people here in our county. So we will forever be in his debt. Joe is a great man, a great American, and it was an honor for me to know him. And Brenda and I extend our condolences to the whole Putnam family. Thank you.
When you had 4 hooligan boys and 2 hooligan daughters, it behooved Joe to befriend the local sheriff's department. A Portola Valley resident and a fellow horseman of Joe's Carter War.
Thank you, Marty. I'm Carter War. I knew Joe for 32 years. That's half my life. But I was a latecomer to his. I met him when I first joined the Mounted Patrol. On some of those rides, he and a few others looked like incredible horsemen. I was literally afraid to talk to him because he rode so much better than I did. I grew up as a team roper. I was in 4-H, raised cattle and horses. In a lot of ways, there are some similarities in our family. Both my parents were Depression-era babies. My mother actually, spent 7 years in a tent in southern Idaho. So there were things about my life, that I think were pretty similar, to some of yours, in the Putnam clan. Joe was gracious, in what he would do, to share his life. In 1998, a mayor of mine, who I really loved, died of congestive heart failure in my pasture. A friend of mine, Jim Milne, was close to Joe, and told Joe that I had lost a horse, and I was pretty desperate, to either do something different or get a horse. Later that week, Joe called and advised me that some buddies of his, were at his place because they'd recently done, a cutting demonstration at Filoli, and had a horse that was for sale that might be something that I might be interested in. He graciously had me over to his place, shared this, new horse. I ended up, buying that horse. His name was Tellus's First Call, but we called him Sid. Sid, was my horse, for a lot of years. He just recently passed. But what Joe did in sharing his incredible gifts, ethics, business values, family values, and horsemanship, to those who was interested in listening, was incredible. His energy was infectious. He was a natural mentor. Just being in his midst, and riding with him, he taught so many things far beyond just horsemanship. He was an example, of a really, really good guy and a really, really good horseman. I'm better because of it. My family's better because of it. I ended up, spending 20 years with my horses at Joe's house. And whether I rode with him, or, was just there on the property, the property and what it represented taught me a lot. My daughter first started riding, one of my cutting horses, that I entered into, kind of the cutting competitions. First started riding my cutting horse when she was 2. I have some pictures, there in the arena. I remember, Emily and Jennifer riding together, and, it was incredible, the spirit that was there. And Joe had come down and, he wouldn't say very much, but, you knew he really loved having people there, and riding good horses. Because of it, my daughter only learned to ride well and only rode well on great horses because Joe taught me it costs the same to take care of a bad horse as a good horse. So you might as well ride the best horse you can afford. Being blessed to be included in Joe's horsemanship life has been an incredible difference. He extended his mentorship in so many ways that the next generations of my family are going to have the benefit of being part of a excellent horsemanship community. He would often say, ride your horse, which meant not just sit on it, but ride it. Give your horse the space to be confident. Communicate clearly every time. Ride with patience, perseverance, and humility. Even great horsemen can get beat. I'll see you at the great gathering in heaven. Thank you, my friend.
I think that's it for this evening. Most of you know tomorrow morning is 10:30 a.m., right, Lisa? 10:30 a.m., and some of you can't make it, so thanks for coming this evening, and for those of you that will make it, we'll see you tomorrow.